800-pound gorilla in the Democratic primary entered the race today with an 800-pound message. Joe Biden taking a 2x4 to Donald Trump's appeal to racists. Biden becomes the first candidate in the Democratic primary to open his campaign with a stinging rebuke of Donald Trump's equivocation after the deadly protests and counter-protests in Charlottesville. We don't know how the Democratic primary will turn out for Biden, but a new bar has been set in terms of calling Donald Trump what he is, a threat to the unity of this country. In his official campaign announcement, Biden cutting right to the bone, articulating the stakes of the next presidential election as being about the soul and character of our nation. Watch.
It was there on August of 2017 we saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open. Their crazed faces, illuminated by torches, veins bulging and bearing the fangs of racism, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. And they were met by a courageous group of Americans, and a violent clash ensued. And a brave young woman lost her life. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And in that moment, I knew the threat to this nation was unlike any I had ever seen in my lifetime. I wrote at the time that we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. Oh, that's even more true today. We are in the battle for the soul of this nation. I believe history will look back on 4 years of this president and all he embraces as an aberrant moment in time. But if we give Donald Trump 8 years in the White House, he will forever and fundamentally alter the character of this nation, who we are, and I cannot stand by and watch that happen.
A powerful takedown from the new Democratic frontrunner of the divisiveness that has come to define Donald Trump's presidency. But even Trump welcomes the fight, tweeting this, quote, "Welcome to the race, Sleepy Joe. I only hope you have the intelligence long in doubt to wage a successful primary campaign. It will be nasty. You'll be dealing with people who truly have some very sick and demented ideas. But if you make it, I'll see you at the starting gate." And that is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends, all on set. Nick Confessori, political reporter for the New York Times, NBC News national political reporter Heidi Price-Bella, Jennifer Palmieri, former White House communications director for President Obama, and our friend Donny Deutsch. I'm going to start with you, Donny Deutsch. I thought that if you had to distill the single most damaging thing Trump has done as president into one incident and articulate how you're going to be a force against the single most damaging thing about Donald Trump's presidency, that was it.
It was brilliant, and it was brilliant because it was him. A 78-year-old can do that. A guy with his history, not that anybody can't say it and won't have the right to say it. He immediately almost took one of his perceived negatives. He's been around too long, he's old, and came, remember Hal Holbrook at Wall Street was kind of like the voice of reason, and he was comfort food. There was something in the tone and manner of that, and that's so much of what this nation needs now. He also figured out, no matter how you run, you have to be the anti-Trump. You know, that's just, it's a very binary choice. You can't ignore Trump. You have to package it in a way that's relevant. The important thing going forward now, you can't just stay on right and wrong. You have to flip that for what does that mean to a voter? So that we can't put up with this injustice anymore because he's killing people with health care. The super rich are getting richer. He's a lawless president. So it can't just be that he's a racist, he's a slimeball, he's a bad guy, and these abstract things of he's destroying the democracy.
Let me push back for a minute. Okay. He didn't
say.
You
always push back on everything. That's why I love being here.
But he didn't say any of those things. He didn't say he's a slimeball. Like, I think the power of the message is that he showed a moment that whether you love Trump or hate Trump, we all lived through Charlottesville. Yes. And we saw on the president's staffers' faces who stood in the lobby of Trump Tower when he did that press conference. I was live on set that day and talked about good people on both sides, that they John Kelly, his former chief, seemed to feel what Joe Biden said. Yeah, we have to get to policies. I understand, unlike Republicans, Democrats like policies. But he went big. And my advice to him would be to stay there.
Well, yes, I love where he went. It's an overall just do it Nike up there. You still then have to go down into women's activewear, into basketball. If you just stay up there, they're going to pick him apart on the policy. But he does have that overarching kind of what we call kind of brand architecture that nobody else can have. And I just think the other thing he has going for him is compassion. The very thing that he got ridiculed for, the hugs, and I made kind of a joke, the country needs a hug. Yeah. That was a big hug.
I think that with the listen, and Democrats shouldn't listen. I am the last person that should weigh in. My position on the Democratic primary is I will vote for someone's bus. Whoever y'all nominate, I will vote for him or her, or the bus, it. However, David Axelrod, President Obama's former chief strategist, said at a campaign event at Annenberg after the 2008 campaign, every election is a reaction to the one that came before it. If we are looking to react to Trump and Trumpism, that's how I want to be made to feel.
Right. But here's the problem is that he can't stay there because he's got that was a beautifully executed video. And I thought it was smart to go to Charlottesville and not talk about the white working class, which I think probably was what people expected him to do. Right. But to answer the question about justice and race. But you can't stay there because you got to go because the next day you got to show up in Iowa or Houston and go to She the People. You got to get, he becomes immortal now. He just becomes another candidate. And I know that what the Biden team is worried about are these high expectations. And being the front runner, particularly Democratic primaries, the front runner doesn't normally win because the front runner is coming in usually artificially inflated. I think there's a lot of Obama nostalgia that's behind this candidacy. Maybe this is a time that works. That has never worked in the Democratic primary before.
Y'all are so hard on yourself.
It's not. I mean, I would love if
let me just
go back to normal. I understand it. They wanted to wash away the Trump presidency, and I would love
I push back against my Democratic
primary in the Republican primary.
Let me get Chris Christie to make my case the way I made it to you. Let me get Chris Christie to push back on you. Chris Christie saying today in a podcast that if Biden can make it through the primaries, if he can make it through all you persnickety policy types,
absolutely.
He's the one Dem candidate who appeals to the white working class voters who handed the election to Trump and could hand 2020 to Biden instead.
If he can get through the Democratic primary. Yes, that's I mean, I think that is what how much can he sustain this? It's a battle of attrition when you're a front runner like this. And when you start losing altitude, every question you get is why aren't you doing better? And it becomes really hard. I mean, these are the realities.
You sound like you're scarred.
These are I'm wise, Donnie.
You know what? She's also speaking from experience, right? Because I covered the Clinton campaign. You were obviously there for the Clinton campaign. And one of the things, and fairly, I think you would agree, one of the criticisms was that whenever Hillary was, facing a moment of stress, she would go back to the temperament argument and go back to defining Trump versus understand the frustration that she talked at length and in great detail, in more detail than any candidate about policy ideas, and just couldn't seem to get, garner the same media attention. And so that is why I do think that it's smart that this is the way he started out. Why? Because in talking to Democratic voters over the past 2 years, they are shaken. This speaks to their deepest anxieties about what they've witnessed over the past 2 years, that to Joe Biden's point, is this who we are, or is this an aberration? And if you talk to these Democratic voters, they say that they realize that things that they've seen, like Charlottesville, like the Pittsburgh shooting, that they didn't realize we had this in our bloodstream. And so that is an open question for them. Is this who we are, or is this an aberration? And so for him to start out this way, I think we can both agree this is a smart idea, but 100% with Jen as well, that beyond that, then he's going to have to say, how do we course correct in terms of specific policy? Because Democrats will demand that. The base will demand that.
I want to ask you a question about political journalism. We sit here and we talk about candidates like a vivisection, right? Cut off their head, cut off their heart, cut off their hands. Voters don't vote the way we analyze politics. It's not how they vote. And I think that, just to be totally blunt right here, that's how we missed 2016. That is how we got it wrong. We treated the voters like, well, their ears will hear grab them in the bleep and their hands will not press a button for Trump. That is not how voters vote. They take a gut measure of a man or a woman and they go with the least awful choice. People don't like politicians, and they pick the least bad person. And if you're really lucky and you're really good like Obama, sometimes they vote out of their better angels. Right. But I thought this play today was about the whole person. I thought this was sort of hanging a lantern around who he is and what he can do. And as you said, it's not the age that lets him come out there and rebuke Charlottesville. It's the father, it's the grandfather, it's someone whose heart was broken by the death of his son, who stood there and said, this guy is breaking my heart when I watch Charlottesville, and we can do better. I thought it was powerful.
Look, politics is about stories, and campaigns are a kind of storytelling. Policies are important. What he's doing here is telling a story of himself as the national emergency candidate. He's saying, look, yes, we can talk later on about Medicare and these other issues, but the problem right now is this one guy. He's an aberration, and we have to get rid of him. The problem for Biden is there is a whole chunk of Democrats on the left who are saying, actually, things were not that good in 2016. Yeah. A restoration is not what I'm looking for. I have some problems with the way the country was running back then, and I want to see some change and solutions. And the question for me is, who's the real audience for all this? I'm not sure it's the white working class. It sounds to me more like the audience is the people who voted for Democrats in the midterms, people in the suburbs who don't like Trump that much, who can be convinced to move away from him, who went to him last time at the last second, who are Republicans. He can peel some of those folks away with this.
I'll tell you, he is the answer versus anything that has the word socialism anywhere near it. You want those same voters that won those 40 districts. That's what you got. I mean, and to me, the other thing I always break it down to, put the guy on stage next to Trump. And I love him on stage next to Trump. I love his height. I love that he threatened to get into a fist fight with Trump. And I love, to your point, the gestalt. He is the ultimate anti-Trump. He is a kind human. Now, take like Mayor Pete, that's another different kind of anti-Trump. There's a different, another kind of anti-Trump, but he's got that stuff. I think if he gets to the general, I think by far, and the Republicans are most frightened of him.
Donnie, let me ask you a question. How does he avoid the same criticism that Hillary Clinton got, for instance, from African-American voters on the crime bill? They both have the same record, and we know that a big part of the problem was her turnout with African-American voters. So after the Republicans have run all of their Oppo ads and done the job on Joe Biden, how does he not end up meeting the same
I'm 78. I've learned things over the years. You know, you're not flipping from age 46 to age 47. Anita Hill, same thing. Shame on me. We've evolved, the same way if you talk to a 78-year-old African-American man, he's going to probably said some inappropriate things towards white people. They're 78. So the difference, if it's genuine and real, and I think people will respect that. People say, I've lost 2 children. I've seen what pain is. I've been on the other side. So if it's genuine, I think it's not a flip-flop. We think differently at 78. I think differently at 60 than I did at 25. So I think any of the older candidates have a chance to do some scrubbing.
I agree they have a chance to do that, but there's so many other options. I mean, that's his problem, is that when he has to do that on Anita Hill, and he's got to do it on the crime bill, and he's got to do that on some credit card votes and some other banking bills, he's going to have to do it so many times, and then you have all the other candidates, all these other options. I think that's like where it becomes, that's where it becomes problematic for him. And in Democratic primaries, for better or worse, it's never the person who's at the lead in the front end. That's not who takes back White Houses. Who takes back White Houses were Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. And it is, this is like there is a curse about being the front runner. It's hard. You get more scrutiny. It's not fair. There's high expectations. I know the Biden team is worried about that. I know that they will be glad to hear me raising some of these flags so that people don't expect that he's going to stay as high as he is. He could still end up as a nominee and take a dip in popularity. And that's likely to happen. He's going to become immortal.
You counting him out today?
No, I'm saying.
You just said the front runner never wins.
I did say the front runner never wins, but I've also learned in
She's
my
pushing back,
experience
by the way.
with you on the.
I'm just trying to get. I'm trying to understand.
I think it's like, first of all, you can't.
You're getting a lot of
you
cynicism
can't
at
make
this table,
predictions.
yeah.
You can't make. Obviously, you can't make predictions anymore like that. But it is. I'm just saying. I love him, and I'm concerned for him that the expectations are too high, and I actually think it's going to be hard. And I think what his staff feels is like it's like history's against us. Vice presidents normally don't win. Front runners normally don't win. Everybody don't think that this is locked up. This is going to be, and he also needs to show, I don't think I have this locked up, and I'm going to go out there and work hard every single day, just like every other candidate is. And so that is, he's going to become, he'll have to become immortal. The way, when Beto first got in the race, everybody was like, oh my God, it's over. And then, when Kamala Harris got in the race and she had her great event in Oakland, people thought like it's going to be her. And then you got to slog it out. And it's Heidi lived through that experience with us. It's really hard.
Are Republicans, are Democrats prepared to keep their fire pointed at Trump, or do they want to kill each other?
I think that they don't want to kill each other. I think they do want to keep their fire trained at Trump. I think with the first debate, when that happens next, in like 6 weeks or so, in June, you will not see anybody attack anyone else. Like they will stay there till the fall, and then it can get tough. And no Democrat goes like, and I don't think Bernie Sanders went after Hillary Clinton thinking that he was doing damage to the Democratic frontrunner. These people really believe what they say, and for better or worse, that's how our Democratic primaries go.
Listen, back in 2016, and this is my opinion here, but the battle between Clinton and Bernie Sanders was far more tame than it could have been or was on the Republican side. They had arguments, they attacked each other, but by the standards of politics, it was not like a crazy fight between the candidates, the supporters online. That's very different. But in some ways, you
mean
can
the rhetoric?
Yeah, and
But
Bernie's staying
like,
in.
the one thing that was deadly about it, the right and the left are making the same argument against her.
Totally.
Yeah.
That kills you.
And Bernie staying in was ultimately contributed
I'm just saying
to her loss.
it's possible
It did.
to have a pretty vigorous debate within a party that isn't a mudfest, and for the Republicans it was, and the guy who gets down in the mud won.
Cole, the one thing I want to
say.
say that I think you really hit on, that you felt something today when he spoke.
She sure did.
And it wasn't all left, right. When I say you, I mean all
I'll
of us.
vote for the bus.
But I'm just saying what was different today than what we've seen, and some people have done things really well and other people's not so much. You felt it. You felt, particularly against the noise. You were listening to the news before and after, and impeachment and tweets and this and that, and you took almost a deep breath. That was the gut thing that you're talking about.
Can I push back? I'm just teasing.
I think we should rename the show.
Now that we've got in my notes, I'm reminding myself. So there are some big advantages that he has when you think about whether Democrats are actually going to go for the progressive firebrand or go for the graybeard. If you look at the word clouds that they're using, the polling word clouds, trusted leader, stability, these are the words that come up time and again in terms of what Democrats are looking for. And after this experience of having a number of them stayed home and seen that the end sum of that was a Trump presidency, many of those voters are going to be in a very different position in 2020 than they were in 2016, when for whatever reason we just didn't see the same kind of turnout numbers. Again, to remind people, Donald Trump got less votes than many other Republicans, including Mitt Romney. The problem here was a lot of it on the Democratic side in turnout.
I want to put you on the spot, Jen, because we're friends, and I hope you'll still be after this question. The most negative things I've heard about Biden have come from former Hillary Clinton staffers and former Obama staffers. Is it because you saw him up close and you know his weaknesses?
No, I love Joe Biden. If Joe Biden could be
I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying privately.
I think, I'm so candid. Okay, I think there are.
Shame on you.
I actually think, okay, so I wanted Joe Biden to get into the race in 2016 because I am probably the only Hillary Clinton staffer who did, because I thought more competition would be good for her, and I thought she would probably beat him. But if not, if he won, so be it. He would be the better candidate. There is some, so there's a little about him, he wasn't always the most supportive from the sidelines, so that might be reflected in how the Clinton staff feel. And Obama's staff, You know, I was an Obama staffer who worked great with the vice president and had a lot of respect for him and think he is a very good person at governing and very good person at politics. You know, not everybody felt that way.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.